Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz, YouTube's post-traumatic parenting expert. Today, we're going to understand some basic psychoanalytic and psychological theory, some theories of human development using the cat in the hat. We're doing this because so many times post-traumatic parents DM me and say that their therapist brought up a term that they didn't quite understand, like object relations or self-psychology or superego, and they want to understand it in order to be able to read up on it, to understand it more. I firmly believe that an educated consumer of psychotherapy is the best consumer of psychotherapy. So sometimes we just want to explore and understand those topics, and let's have a little fun while we do it. Let's understand how the self develops and how we understand our relationships with our parents using the cat in the hat. Have you ever said to yourself, I hope my damage doesn't damage my children? Have you ever said, recent events in my life have left me so depleted. I don't have the psychological resources left for parenting. Will my trauma traumatize my kids? Have you ever said, how can I give my kids a healthy childhood? I didn't experience one. Then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Post-Traumatic Parenting YouTube channel, where we answer questions like these. If you like this content, please hit subscribe below. So let's understand some basic psychological theory, some of the foundations of psychological thinking about family, children, and parenting using the cat in the hat. So when we start the cat in the hat, we have Sally and her brother. We don't know his name. His name is just I, right? And Sally and I are sitting, we're kind of bored. Mom's away for the day. We're going to get into why mom's away for the day and why that's important. When all of a sudden, all we could do was sit. And we did not like it, not one little bit. And then something went bump. There's an upheaval. How that bump made us jump. We looked and we saw him step in on the mat. We looked and we saw him, the cat in the hat. The cat in the hat represents the id. The id is the part of our psychological structures, the part of our psyche that just wants what it wants when it wants it, right? If you have a little 2-year-old and the candy cabinet is open and he just sits there and just is stuffing candy into his mouth as fast as he possibly can, he's not thinking, will I get a tummy ache later? He's not thinking about what all that artificial coloring and sugar is going to do to his health. He's not thinking, does this candy belong to somebody else? He's not thinking, later when I don't have candy to eat, will I regret it? Right? Will mom be mad? Nope. All he's thinking is candy, 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 candy. That's our id. Our id just wants what it wants when it wants it. There's an advantage to having an id, and we're going to get into what the id is for. So now Sally and I don't know what to do because our mother is out of the house for the day, but the fish knows what to do. But our fish said, no, make that cat go away. Tell that cat in the hat you do not wish to play. He should not be here. He should not be about. He should not be here when your mother is out. The fish represents the superego. The superego is the part of the psyche in psychoanalytic thinking where it's the voice of mom and the voice of society. The superego says, no, you should not. You are not allowed to. Bad boy, shame on you. Don't eat that candy. You better not. Mommy won't love you anymore. That's the job of the superego. The job of the superego is to very much keep the id's impulses in check. The superego is the no, and the id is candy, 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 right? But in between superego and id is a structure known as the ego, the I, Sally and I, right? And in the entire book, we never learn the boy's name. His name is I, because I is the operating principle of self. I am the part of me that tells the story of what's going on and tells it, well, maybe we could sneak a couple of jelly beans that nobody will miss, and then tell superego, we don't have to feel that guilty because it's only 3 jelly beans. No one's going to care, right? So that the ego is constantly mediating between what the id wants to do and what the superego wants. Now, have no fear, said the cat. My tricks are not bad, said the cat in the hat. Why, we can have lots of good fun if you wish with a game that I call Up with a Fish. Put me down, said the fish. This is no fun at all. Put me down, said the fish. I do not wish to fall. So we see the id and the superego really fighting with each other right away. Have no fear, said the cat. I will not let you fall. And of course, the cat is holding him up high on a ball, and then he's balancing a cup and a cake and a little toy ship. And the cat says, look at me now, said the cat. With a cup and a cake on the top of my hat, he's just showing off and showing off. This is what the self-psychologists, Kernberg and Kohut, would talk about in terms of developing a sense of self. In order to develop a sense of self, what we need is the experience of the child looks up at mom and says, you are perfect and I'm part of you. And mom looks down at the child and says, you are my child. I am gazing upon you with delight. Right? The whole look ma, no hands, right? Like, look at me now. The kids, when little kids can be very exhibitionist, right? Sorry, I got caught on that word. They tend to be exhibitionist. That's because this is an essential psychological function, to be seen and admired. Whoa, what an adorable kid you are. Wow, what a wonderful parent you are. A mutual admiration society helps a child develop a sense of self. And even more importantly, look at me now. It is fun to have fun, but you have to know how. In order to have the capacity for fun and joy and creativity, you need that look at me now. You need to be gazed upon with delight. This is something we have to think about when we're tempted to criticize or shame or blame our kids too much. And when we sometimes as post-traumatic parents, we forget to delight in the joys. We are busy, we're preoccupied, we're dissociated, and we're not like paying attention to, a kid does something for the first time, or for the 15th time, a little kid draws something, a scribble scrabble, and they want to show it to you. And we're so preoccupied, we don't realize that we need to go, oh my gosh, I really like the way you use the color red. Wow, you scribbled up that whole entire page. Wow, look at how well you can hold that crayon now, right? Children need to be admired. We can't spoil them. People think that somehow you can spoil them with too much of that. I think you can spoil them when you start telling them how they're better than everybody else, right? And they deserve better treatment. Yes, we can create narcissistic, entitled children that way. We can teach our children to ignore the needs and wants of others, but simply saying to a child, wow, look at how you did that. I noticed that your little sister was annoying you and you didn't slap her and you didn't yell at her. You spoke to her kindly. Wow, I'm proud, right? We can constantly be noticing the wonderful things about them and sharing joy in their accomplishments, because that does create the capacity for joy. That's where the child learns how to sublimate. So Freud talks about 2 forms of defenses, immature and mature, or maladaptive and adaptive defenses, right? A maladaptive defense is something like denial, where you're like, just pretend something isn't happening. An adaptive defense would be something like sublimation. I have this desire to eat all the candy in sight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sublimate that. I'm going to open a candy store. I'm going to become like the best chocolatier in the world. I'm going to become an amazing cook, right? I have this desire to make huge messes. I'm going to become an artist, right? So I'm going to take that desire I have, sublimate it, and turn it into something that is adaptive, that people like, that people praise me for, right? I'm going to use that desire that maybe isn't great for something fantastic. That's sublimation. That's a good defense. Okay, so of course the id is doing all of these things, and then it results in disaster because the id doesn't know its limits. And then that is what the cat said, that he fell on his head. He came down with a bump from up there on the ball, and Sally and I, we saw all the things fall. And now we have this giant mess, and the super ego starts really giving it to the id. Now look what you did, said the fish to the cat. Now look at this house. Look at this. Look at that. You sank our toy ship, sank it deep in the cake. You shook up our house. You bent our new rake. You should not be here when our mother is not. You get out of this house, said the fish in the pot. right? And that should, that shaming, look what you did, you're bad. That's the superego. As parents, when we have that should voice in our own heads about our own parenting, we want to think really hard where that voice is coming from, right? Because when we're stuck in that frozen shame zone of, look what you did, you yelled at your kid, right? When we're doing that, we're not engaging in reparative action. We're not being kind to ourselves. We're not speaking to ourselves the way we would want to be speaking to our child, right? So we want to notice that should voice, that must voice, and think hard about where did that come from? Even if you're not in psychoanalysis and that's not the form of therapy you're in, but think about the should voice. Think about those desires you have. Think about how your ego is mediating between the two. Think about what's fun. Do I know what's fun? Do I know what I enjoy? Right? What can I gain some joy out of? How can I play in my life? Right? Who delights in me? Who do I delight in? These are important questions to ask ourselves. Now, our id is a little bit more resistant to that, but I like to be here, or I like it a lot, said the cat in the hat to the fish in the pot. I will not go away. I do not wish to go. And then, of course, once we give the id like unfettered access, he will come out with even more and more things. And he comes out, of course, with thing 1 and thing 2, and they create a lot of chaos, right? They make a huge mess and we don't know what to do. So they're playing, they're flying kites in the house, they're ruining mommy's pretty house, everything's getting ruined. And this is a problem. This is getting worse and worse. And the ego finally says, I got to take a stand. This is not working out. So the ego, right, I says, then those things ran about with big bumps, jumps, and kicks, and with hops and big thumps and all kinds of bad tricks. And I said, I do not like the way that they play. If mother could see this, oh, what would she say? Right? So now we're starting to allow reality to intrude. It's not just my mental representation of mother. Mother herself is going to come home. I, the ego, I don't like this. Yeah, it was fun to let it out a little and have a little fun and be a little mischievous while mommy was gone. And I could ignore the superego, the should not, for a while, but this is starting to get out of hand. And remember we said about mental representation of mommy versus actual mommy? Then our fish said, look, and our fish shook with fear. Your mother is on her way home. Do you hear? Oh, what will she do to us? What will she say? Oh, she will not like it to find us this way. So it's mental representation of mom is one thing. Actual mom is another thing. We're going to talk about difference. So do something fast, said the fish. Do you hear? I saw her. Your mother is near. So as fast as you can think of something to do, you have to get rid of thing 1 and thing 2. So finally, Peter, which later in life, Dr. Seuss said his name was Peter. So I finally get up. So as fast as I could, I went after my net and I said, with my net, I can get them. I bet with my net, I can get those things yet. It takes the ego, the self, the operating principle of self to say, I'm getting this under control. And he does. He gets them in the net. And finally, what happens? That is good, said the fish. He has gone away, yes, but your mother will come. She will find this big mess. And this mess is so big and so deep and so tall, we cannot pick it up. There is no way at all. So right now, the shaming voice of the superego is freezing, right? It freezes I. And when I'm in that deeply frozen shame state, I can't do anything. I'm frozen. I have no energy. I can't fix the mess I've made. I can't apologize. I can't clean up. I can't do anything because I'm frozen, right? And polyvagal theory would talk about the freeze state as opposed to the fight or flight stage, right? When he gathered up the things, he was in fight stage, right? But now what do? He's frozen in shame. He's frozen in fear. I just cannot do it because that frozen shame removes our psychological resources and we have nothing left, no energy to fix the problem, even if we know what needs to be fixed. So imagine a mom who's yelling at her kids and her superego starts saying, you shouldn't do that. And then she just doesn't apologize and goes to Netflix and chill to dissociate because she can't, right? That frozen shame state demotivates us. So we have to pay attention to it. And then, because this is what happens, what we need then is that creative joy spark. That's our id. Those negative impulses can also be our most positive impulses if they're sublimated properly. And then, who was back in the house? Why, the cat. Have no fear of this mess, said the cat in the hat. I always pick up my playthings, and so I will show you another good trick that I know. And then we saw him pick up all the things that were down. He picked up the cake and the rake and the gown and the book and the dish and the fan and the cup and the ship and the fish, and he put them away. Then he said, that is that. And then he was gone with a tip of his hat. So when we let the id back in, right? When we examine our behavior, when we agree, I did something wrong, I'm mad at myself, and we let the id back in a bit, that's when we get the energy to solve the problem, to fix it, to clean out that mess, to dig out from under that giant pile of regret and shame and fear that we're feeling. We just dig out from under it because we need those id impulses, that creativity, that joy, that desire, right? My desire to be a good parent can counteract that shaming voice in my head that says, how could you do that? How dare you? The desire to parent well, right? That's the id. That desire is what will eventually allow me to go to my kids and make a reparative action and discuss it and perhaps problem solve for the future so that doesn't happen again. And finally, this is really interesting, right? Mommy is basically this absentee figure in the book, right? We don't know. We don't know actual mother. All we see is this kind of hyper feminine image of a high-heeled shoe and a little red coat, right? That's all we know of mom. Because in psychoanalytic theory, the mental representation of the mom is what mattered. The actual mom and her actual behavior didn't matter at all. In fact, there's an interesting story that John Bowlby was being supervised by Melanie Klein, who was one of the original psychoanalysts who wrote very interesting thoughts about psychological development and how a child relates to the mental representations of mom. So John Bowlby was treating a little boy whose mother, I believe, was incarcerated or sick. She disappeared on him. And the little boy was pining. And John Bowlby went to Melanie Klein and said, this little boy is pining for his mother. And Melanie Klein said, oh, the mother's presence or absence is irrelevant. Nah, it's a mental representation of mother that matters. And Bowlby was like, kind of think he's missing his actual mom. And that's what sparked his interest in attachment theory, looking at the research of Harlow and understanding how attachment works, was from, no, I think this kid misses, actual mommy. So now we go from mental representation of mom, right? The fish saying like, mother will come home, she will be angry, we will lose mommy's love if we give into id's impulses, right? So mother actually comes home. Then our mother came in and she said to us did you have any fun? Tell me, what did you do? And Sally and I did not know what to say. Should we tell her the things that went on there that day? Should we tell her about it? Now, what should we do? Well, what would you do if your mother asked you? And you see, here is where we can talk about attachment, not so much in the children's behavior, but in the mother's behavior, right? Where when the mother asks, how will she respond? Right? That will tell us something about attachment, right? Our hypotheses mother in our brain, right? When I tell her about it, secure attachment, mom's like, well, sounds like you learned your lesson. Sounds like you had some fun. I'm glad you cleaned up. Is it, how dare you make a mess? You should never do that. I'm sending you to your room without supper, right? What's actual mother's reaction going to be? Because depending on actual mother's reaction, that's how my psyche is going to develop. It's not only mental representation of mom. Actual mom becomes mental representation of mom. Is there a mental representation of you failed, you went over to someone and you're like, hi, what's your name? And you tried to become their friend and they showed no interest. Is there a little voice in your head going like, that's okay, her loss, I'm going to try somebody else. I'll have better luck later. Maybe she's having a bad day. Or is the mental representation of your mom being like, well, obviously, why would I want to be friends with you? Right? Because the words we say to our kids become the words their self-talk and the words in their head. So we have to be very careful because actual mom does become mental representation of mom. And that's where Melanie Klein was wrong. Mental representation of mom is important, but mental representation of mom comes from actual mom. And we need to be careful because we are not mental representation of mom. We are actual mom or actual dad in our kids' lives. So let me know if this interested you, if you have a different take on psychoanalytic and object relations theory, if you like this video, if you want more explorations of basic psychological concepts using picture books. If you liked it, comment below. If you agree, if you disagree, I'd love to hear it. If you like our content, please subscribe, please like, save, comment, share. Please check out the post-traumatic parenting community on Instagram, where you can interact with the content, where if you're a subscriber, you can ask direct questions about post-traumatic parenting. We set the subscription price at 99 cents a month because we don't want cost to ever be a barrier for anyone. And if you want longer form content explaining post-traumatic parenting and hear my interviews of authors of important books on post-traumatic parenting, please check out the Post-Traumatic Parenting podcast, available wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for joining.